what he's done is stand up for freedoms. And
stand up for freedoms? What f***ing freedoms, you absolute ape? What do you mean? What freedoms? He's literally making the state of Florida and pushing for the entire country to be less free. He is anti-abortion. He is pro-forced birth. That's not freedom, brother. You don't know what freedom is. He's already anti-trans. We know this. Obviously, this point won't stick, but to have gender-affirming care, trans healthcare, as a trans person is literally freedom. The freedom to do with your body what you so choose. That is your individual liberty. That is your bodily autonomy. The same argument people make for people having the choice to have an abortion or not. The opposite of that, which Ron DeSantis is currently pushing and supports, is to make that impossible, to outlaw even adults being able to access trans healthcare, gender-affirming care. That's literally the opposite of freedom, you stupid fucking moron. So on this broadcast, we don't often make it a point to like highlight some of the big thinkers of our day, some of the theory as it pertains to our political ideas and whatnot. So I figured we might as well start today with a cool new segment going over Joe Rogan, of all people, who's decided to weigh in on potential candidates for president in 2024. So on his program with I don't know who this is, he gets posed the question. Let's see his answer. You know, some of you might be spoiled by this point. Well, let's see what's up. You know, this guy is known to be pretty smart, so let's see what he has to say.
yeah, so all this stuff is happening while we have a dead man as a president.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
Are you throwing out
it's not fun.
Any support towards anyone, or are you going to hold off and because I know, didn't Elon Musk come out recently for DeSantis?
Yeah, I think Ron DeSantis would work as a good president. I think.
So my question is, would Joe Rogan have said that if his guest didn't elaborate on the question with, didn't Elon Musk come out for DeSantis? I wonder if he would have answered the same way. Like, the guest could have just posited DeSantis, but the fact that they said Elon Musk came out in support of DeSantis makes me think. Joe Rogan, you know, he's a very impressionable mind. You know, he's very, you know, liberal, apparently, in that way.
I feel like what he did for Florida, a lot of people gave him a lot of grief, but ultimately he was correct. He was correct when it comes to, like, deaths. He was correct when it comes to protecting our vulnerable populations. He was correct in terms of distribution of monoclonal antibodies. And he was furious when the government tried to pull those. They were trying to pull very effective treatments.
What? How can you say he was correct when it comes to deaths? 75,000 people died in Florida as a result of COVID. Matt Lech put out a really good tweet about this as well. So Florida has a population of 21 million people. Taiwan, on the other hand, is a population of 23 million. So 2 million more people, roughly, give or take. Florida has had 75,671 as of the posting of this tweet, deaths from COVID. Taiwan, on the other hand, has had 6,448. I do not know how you could possibly say that he's done well when it comes to deaths specifically. And it is very true. You know, Matt goes on to say, Rogan et al. Are conditioning you to worship death because there's a lot more coming where that came from. She thought COVID was the end of the mass death we'll be seeing. This country's leading in a shaky direction. But he also said that DeSantis apparently was furious that the government so-called tried to pull monoclonal antibodies from Florida, but I'm pretty sure that's not even the case. I'm pretty sure it was the case that because so many people were hyping up monoclonal antibodies as being this miracle life-saving solution to COVID rather than getting the vaccine before getting COVID. The problem with that is that that level of hype around that idea caused a shortage in the monoclonal antibodies, and the federal government was having difficulties distributing it to places where it needed to be. So I'm filming this a couple days later. I wanted to issue a quick correction on this point about the monoclonal antibodies. So it was the case that DeSantis went all in on the monoclonal antibody treatment rather than prioritizing vaccinations. And then Omicron happened. And because he had so many monoclonal antibody treatments that just were not effective against the new variant, that whole plan fucking fell apart. Whereas obviously if he went with the vaccines, first of all, it would have been fine. So it seems like he allegedly constructed this whole, oh, the government's trying, the CDC, Dr. Fauci is trying to take these monoclonal antibodies away because they want to forcefully vaccinate you all and turn you all into liberal soy boys or whatever. So that's just, you know, quick correction. You could have avoided all of that if people just got vaccinated. But obviously Joe Rogan has been vociferously anti-vaccine, as has been Elon Musk, as has been Ron DeSantis, as has been Donald Trump, as has been literally every single person who has been wrong on COVID since the beginning and continues to be wrong at the cost of 75,000 human lives in Florida, at the very least. So I don't know how you get this idea that Ron DeSantis made good decisions when it comes to COVID, and that's somehow going to make him a good fit for president. First of all, when you analyze who's a good fit for president, you want to look at, sure, the things that they do when they're in office or whatever other position they might hold, but you also want to look at their policy positions. You also want to look at the things that they push for and the priorities that they focus when it comes to the legislation and the other political acts that they're trying to do. Ron DeSantis has been full-throatedly in support of indoctrinating your kids, book burning, the whitewashing of history, being anti-queer generally, being anti-abortion. All of these things, which are not conducive to the well-being of this country, but somehow that makes Ron DeSantis a good candidate for president. I'm curious, if the fucking guest didn't bring up DeSantis, I wonder what Joe Rogan would have said. But of course, as we know, Joe Rogan and his tiny little ape brain is just a sponge. He's like Donald Trump in that way. And the last person that he talks to, that talks to him about whatever ideas, has a high probability of then being Joe Rogan's opinion on the matter. Whoever Joe Rogan surrounds himself with, you know, those are his opinions now. When he was in California, he was a lot more left-leaning. He supported Bernie Sanders way back when. He also was in favor of a UBI because he had Andrew Yang on his program and other people who talked about it in a positive way. He was also just generally relatively center-leftish. But now that he's moved to Texas, I believe, now he's surrounded himself, it would seem, with a bunch of conservatives, and he's having more and more of these conservatives on his program. He does still sometimes have people you could say are on the left on his program, but it's increasingly rare. Wanted to record this a couple days later as well. I saw this video on a Kyle Kulinski video about this topic, debunking the media's projection of quote-unquote far-right Joe Rogan. Now, obviously, this is made by a Joe Rogan stan, so they're trying to be like, ha, liberals, you'd say Joe Rogan is far-right? Well, here's a bunch of clips of him saying left-wing stuff. But that's actually useful in this case, because if you're Joe Rogan and you've gone from endorsing Bernie Sanders to then tacitly endorsing Ron DeSantis, I don't know how you get from point A to point B if you have any actual fundamental principles, values, like logical understandings of your ideology and how you apply it to the politics of the world. So here's a cool compilation of previous statements, not even from that long ago, from Joe Rogan. Let's see what's up.
I really believe if Michelle Obama runs, she wins. She's good. She's great. She's the wife of the best president that we have had in our lifetime.
And that's really just all that you need. All you need to be a president is to just have been related to a president. Well, to be fair, the First Lady does do some stuff. They usually give them a pet project for Michelle Obama. It was taking away your goddamn nuggies and making your school lunches more healthy or whatever. Some fucking liberal bullshit like that. For Melania Trump, I forget what it was, really. And for Jill Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, I don't know what her thing is either. But usually they have like some pet project over the course of however long or the entire administration. And they also, you know, they dabble in things and they do stuff. So it is true that a first lady could have some information that would help and assist her in being the president. But also, I'm not really the biggest fan of political dynasties. Not a really big fan of the monarchy, you know.
Voted right wing in my life. I consider universal basic income a really good idea. I want free college education. Take it easy. Hello, Bernie.
So he recently reneged on that as well. So he had Andrew Yang on his program, and then I think he was into UBI before Andrew Yang came on his program, but he certainly was afterward because Andrew Yang's, you know, pet project was the UBI thing. I'm not a big fan of Andrew Yang's specific brand of UBI. I think Andrew Yang, generally speaking, is not the greatest politician. But UBI, generally speaking, as a concept, depending on how you implement it, it makes a lot of sense. And it would be really helpful to a lot of people in this country. But then he eventually went back on that because he said some stupid bullshit like, oh, it makes people not want to work. And we got to have, essentially saying that we need to keep the poor's poor in order to motivate them to go to work to generate the money for the rich people and provide the goods and services for the people that aren't the workers themselves. This is essentially the take, right? Like, we gotta threaten people with homelessness, with starvation, with poverty to motivate them to want to go to work, which, if you look at other civilized countries that actually pay their workers fair wages, give them good benefits, and other such things, they still have people working. In fact, those workers are often more productive. And they usually, in surveys, respond that they are happier, generally speaking, and also with their work. Because it turns out that human beings like being productive. They like helping others. They like providing a good or service to other people. So if you give people the ability to do the work that they enjoy and that fulfills them, whatever it may be, they tend to be okay with doing it outside of that coercion. What can you do?
How are you, Joe?
Wonderful. Pleasure to meet you.
Bernard.
Nice to meet you.
This was such a... Not this. Get this out of my face. This was such a good time in the world. I feel like it was a pretty shit time, generally speaking. But the fact that Bernie was able to go on here, and that episode is really good as well. Also, Dr. Cornel West's episode on Joe Rogan is also really good. It was pretty good, man.
I like Tulsa.
Not this, though. I don't like any of this. This can stay far away from me.
And I like Bernie. That's it.
Oh, yeah?
Everybody else can eat shit.
Look at you, fucking progress.
Look, it's Jimmy Dore, who was ostensibly left-wing. He seems to, continue to drift. And Tulsi Gabbard, who is ostensibly left-wing, but then has recently shown herself to just be a right-wing opportunist who used her liberal credentials to sheepdog some lefties into conservative thought. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think I'll probably vote for Bernie. I think he's looking out
so
for
so essentially the take is that whoever Joe Rogan talks to last, those are the opinions that he holds. Except for when it comes to like weed. You know what I mean? Like, and really it's just because it seems that he just doesn't really have very strong convictions. He hasn't really completely like logicked out and grounded his ideology. And because of the fact that he's like very malleable, if you get someone in there and you're like massaging him around, you can get him to believe certain things for some amount of time, which is not that great, I don't think. Especially considering he's surrounded himself with a lot of fucking conservatives nowadays ever since he moved from California.
People to have a better life and do better. And if that means I have to pay more in tax, like people think, oh, you're a socialist. I've heard people say that. Oh, you're a fucking socialist, bro. Like, first of all, he's not even a socialist. He's a democratic socialist. It's a different thing.
Surely, it's a different thing. So at least on policy, Bernie Sanders was a social democrat, which is still a pro-capitalist ideology. And I know that Joe Rogan's a capitalist, so he could just be a social democrat. Like, Joe Rogan doesn't have to be a leftist. Now, obviously, it would be cool if he was, but I would not expect that ever at any point in time in my entire life that I've been aware of Joe Rogan. However, he could be a social democrat. Like, you can be pro-capitalist. In fact, some say that social democracy is one of the best possible iterations of capitalism. Many countries institute social democratic reforms in order to save capitalism from devolving into either some kind of like autocratic state or, socialism or communism. You could very easily, like, sock dem pill a lot of dumbasses like Joe Rogan if you explain to them that it is a pro-capitalist ideology, and then you give them the data. And then obviously if they're not receptive to it, then, whatever, but...
like to spend more in taxes if they could fix inner city communities and take these poor neighborhoods and throw a fuckload of them. Spend more, you fucking Republican piece of shit. 87% of scientists said that human activity is driving global warming. I'm very pro-choice. I'm very women's rights, civil rights, gay rights, trans rights. I'm even...
I don't know how you can say this. This is one of his newer sets, too. This isn't that old of a clip. How can you go from that? From saying this, which of course, words don't mean anything. Your actions speak louder. To supporting Ron DeSantis, who is anti all of that. Every single thing that Ron DeSantis has done. He's increased the police state. He's made his state less democratic. He's done a full-scale fucking assault on LGBTQ people. We've seen just how bad certain school districts in Florida have been when it comes to the Don't Say Gay bill. Like, Ron DeSantis is diametrically opposed to literally everything that Joe Rogan has talked about in this compilation. And a lot of these are recent clips, like, relatively speaking.
Universal health care. Obviously, this
is an old clip.
Status.
So you'll know how old, if you've watched it. I used to watch Joe Rogan, and I would usually watch when he had like comedians on, like Joey Diaz, or when he would have people on that I thought were cool and interesting. So you'll know, like, if you're aware of Joe Rogan, how old a clip is by the background. This is an old ass fucking clip. because of the background. But this previous clip with this new neon sign in the background, that is fairly recent as far as I'm aware. There's also the American flag background, which denotes a different time period.
Is driving me crazy, this thing that Trump's doing with children that were born in other countries and then brought over here as children, and then they're talking about deporting them. That drives me fucking crazy. Yeah,
and DeSantis is that. You bitch you. Like, obviously people's views in the world can change, but I don't know how they change that drastically. Like, Joe Rogan is like a fucking 13-year-old leftist on Twitter, where one day they're like a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, third worldist, and then eventually they identify as like a market socialist, and then eventually they say they're like an anarcho-communist, and this is all like within the span of like a year. Like, that's what Joe Rogan has done, except I guess the time scale is a lot longer.
I don't give a fuck if they broke the law. You don't take parents and kids and separate them. You just fucking don't. You know Alonzo?
No, who's that?
A funny comedian.
Yeah.
He said, he goes, not all Donald Trump supporters are racist, but all racists are Donald Trump supporters.
True.
He definitely awakened that side.
But
the January 6th thing is important.
See, it is important, but
Sauger.
is it the 6 months later? Should be the rule?
Yes, you stupid fuck. I hate Sauger and Jetty, this motherfucking fascist piece of shit worm. He's such a spineless little fucking weasel. Sorry. Anyway. Like, he's consistently trying to hide his power level when it comes to his fucking fascist ideology by calling himself like I don't even know what he calls himself anymore. But like, it's so obvious to anybody with any amount of understanding about politics. Like, ooh, is it really something we should care about 6 months after it happened? A potential overthrow of our democracy and the coup attempt that was unsuccessful? Should we really learn about that as much as we can in order to prevent it from happening in the future? Like, should we possibly look into that at all if we're fans of democracy? Surely not.
I think it's really important. And one of the reasons why I think it's important, because it highlights the reasons why a guy like Donald Trump is so fucking dangerous, is because a guy can incite a bunch of morons to do something really fucking stupid. As far as
how is DeSantis any different? How is DeSantis any different? This is talking about the Jan 6 committee. This is a recent ass clip right here. How is DeSantis any different than Donald Trump? He's just got less scandal. He's just not as good of a poster on Twitter. And he's smarter. He's not as fucking stupid as Donald Trump. Meaning that he's more dangerous. But that's probably why Joe Rogan likes him, right? That affect of not being completely fucking unhinged because DeSantis is smarter than Trump and more strategic than Trump is able to convince fucking apes like Joe Rogan.
I got nothing but love for you, for everybody. And in fact, Eddie Izzard is one of my all-time favorite guests.
Oh, I love Izzard.
The right-wing thing is just an easy way to dismiss me, because I'm not right-wing. I can't recommend your book, Race Matters, enough.
Like, anyway, I just wanted to show that to add to the previous video that I recorded last stream about how fucking absurd it is for Joe Rogan to say he supports DeSantis. So, yeah. Let's continue the clip, I suppose.
Is not perfect. He's a human being, but...
He's not perfect, Ron DeSantis. He's just a human being, He's not perfect. Sometimes you make a oopsie, sometimes you have a mistake, and 75,000 people die because you don't know how to adequately combat a public health crisis, so whoopsie. It's a little shaky, it's difficult being a leader of a state, Sometimes you're going to step in it.
What he's done is stand up for freedoms, and people think that
stand up for freedoms. What fucking freedoms, you absolute ape? What do you mean? What freedoms? He's literally making the state of Florida and pushing for the entire country to be less free. He is anti-abortion. He is pro-forced birth, which is literally the antithesis of freedom for women and anybody who can give birth, to force them to have that pregnancy go to term, or now the parent of this child is now strapped financially for the rest of their days until that child can move out, if they even can. That's not freedom, brother. You don't know what freedom is. What about, he's already anti-trans. We know this. Obviously, this point won't stick, but to have gender-affirming care, trans health care, as a trans person is literally freedom. The freedom to do with your body what you so choose. That is your individual liberty. That is your bodily autonomy. The same argument people make for people having the choice to have an abortion or not. The opposite of that, which Ron DeSantis is currently pushing and supports, is to make that impossible, to outlaw even adults being able to access trans healthcare, gender-affirming care. That's literally the opposite of freedom, you stupid fucking moron. And Joe Rogan should be fine with gender-affirming care. He's literally on TRT. He talks about how he's on testosterone replacement therapy. He's talked very positively about it. He said something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, men, when you get older, your testosterone starts to wane, and you should be able to supplement that with TRT and be the man that you want to be. That is literally gender affirming care. Because you're getting older and because your testosterone is falling off plus L plus ratio, now you're taking testosterone to supplement what your body used to produce. And as such, you are affirming your gender using hormones. It's literally HRT. But of course, he doesn't see it that way because it's so-called normal. It's normal for men to take these things. It's normal for women to take any kind of medications or supplements that affects their hormones. It's totally normal because those are cis people. If you're trans, however, to Joe Rogan, it's a little bit up in the air now, isn't it? If you were actually in favor of freedom, you would be one of the greatest detractors of Ron DeSantis.
So there's some weird gaslighting shit that went on where people equated freedom and saying the word freedom to like right-wing bigotry and hate. It is so strange.
Which is not even to bring up the long history of so-called freedom being the justification to keep in place all manner of marginalization on oppressed groups like Black people during the slave days. Freedom to keep slaves was a big thing that people talked about back in those days. Or when it comes to the kind of wage slavery that we see nowadays, the freedom to be able to employ who you want to employ and pay them whatever you wish. That's a kind of freedom that capital owners, the heads of corporations, the management of these companies have. That's their freedom, man. It is what it is. It's almost like freedom can be applied to a variety of contexts. And when people say that, the way that right-wingers, whose policy positions are antithetical to the individual liberty and bodily autonomy of the people whom they are directed at, the oppressed and marginalized people that they don't like, it's almost like when they invoke freedom, they're doing it for racist and bigoted aims. That's not to say the concept of freedom generally is racist, because that's ludicrous and literally nobody says that. It's just that there are certain contexts where it can be used for those ends. But of course, that's way too much nuance. Everything has to be black and white. Everything has to be a binary, right? Joe Rogan, big fan of the binary, of course. And yes, of course, Elon Musk did also say that apparently the first time he ever voted Republican was for Mayra Flores, who is an anti-choice, pro-forced birth politician in Texas, which, by the way, the Democratic Party completely failed on. It's a seat that has been nearly unbroken from Democratic control for 4 decades, but apparently the Democrats stopped paying attention to it, stopped putting as much resources into it, and now a Republican has won it, so that's cool. This person asks, I assume Republican for President 2 to be decided. Who are you leaning towards? DeSantis. If you're saying that Republican for President 2 is to be decided, meaning that, we'll leave it up in the air if I might go for a Democrat instead or whatever. Because he's asking what party affiliation for president, not the specific person. And he says to be decided. And then he asks, what are you leaning towards? He says DeSantis. It's a Republican. How can you possibly be like, yeah, DeSantis is who I'm leaning toward, but I might vote for a Democrat? Are you insane? Have you lost your mind? Obviously, he's going to vote for the Republican president, whoever it is. Because he's lost the image of being this, apolitical, enlightened centrist, Tony Stark, Keanu Chungus, Among Us, Wholesome 100 kind of character that he wanted to be. And now the conditions of this country are getting to the point where he has to be more mask off about his actual political ambitions. And surprise, surprise, one of the most wealthy people in the country, if not the most wealthy person in the country, is more in favor of Republicans who are more likely to cut his taxes and cut regulation than the Democrats, who are slightly more likely, but still pretty fucking weak at doing that. So obviously, now with the endorsement of Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, and generally speaking, it seems like the general zeitgeist, the discourse around this idea, is that DeSantis is going to be one of the major players in the 2024 Republican primary. How about we look at that a little bit, shall we? So for those of you who don't know, there was some bombshell testimony by Mark Meadows, the previous administration's chief of staff, his aide, about the conduct of Donald Trump, a variety of people in the Trump White House, and the Secret Service, where briefly and in summary, she testified under oath that apparently at the Ellipse, where Donald Trump held his rally before they all moved to the Capitol, there were apparently metal detectors, or mags, that for the people that went into the ellipse, for the main rally crowd, and a lot of people there were stopped who were found and had confiscated weapons like knives and whatnot. And then eventually it was found out that Capitol Police had seen that people who had not gone through those metal detectors, some had AR-15s, some had Glock-style pistols, some were apparently fashioning spears on the end of flagpoles, which is a common tactic by people on the right when they bring flags to protests or counter-protests. Those flagpoles can also be weapons, whether or not there's a spear at the end of it or not. And apparently Trump has allegedly said that he wanted those metal detectors to be taken away because, one, he thought that it was making his crowd size look smaller because a lot of the people who showed up to the Capitol who were armed didn't want to go through the metal detectors, obviously. And for two, he also said that when he was pushed back on for wanting to get rid of those metal detectors, he said something along the lines of, if they're not here to hurt me, paraphrasing, suggesting that, well, who are they here to hurt? And of course, we see the chants of people saying, quote unquote, hang Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi. It's really not a hop, skip, and a jump to suggest that Donald Trump was aware that people were there who were armed and that they were potentially going to do violence to other people who aren't Trump. Like, if you get that posed to you, like, hey, Mr. President, there are people with guns out there. That's why the metal detectors are here. The rational response to that might be, oh, wow. Well, first of all, then we probably shouldn't get rid of the metal detector. And second of all, well, I don't think that they intend to use them generally, right? Like, I think they're fine people. I think they're just armed because that's their constitutional liberty. That's their right, yada, yada, yada. But instead he said, no, they're not here to hurt me, which suggests that they were there to hurt somebody else. So what's interesting about this as it pertains to DeSantis is that I don't know that we've seen Ron DeSantis say a whole lot about January 6th. Now, obviously, we know that like the people around him are kind of hyping him up as a potential candidate for the 2024 Republican primary and then for obviously the general. But we don't know how much of his own thoughts on the matter are. So apparently Business Insider on June 27th has an article out. Ron DeSantis sees the January 6 hearings as a way to get Trump indicted. Report says as rumors grow over 2024 run. So Ron DeSantis sees the January 6 committee hearings as a way of getting former President Donald Trump indicted. An anonymous source told Politico. So it is an anonymous source. As rumors continue to grow of the Florida governor's ambitions for a 2024 run for president. Quote, that's where his head is at. He thinks the goal here is to get Maine justice to go after him. A Republican consultant described as familiar with DeSantis' thinking told Politico. That's what Ron thinks this is all about. DeSantis' campaign office told Insider the quote from Political story was false. So of course, regardless of if it's true or not, they're going to come out against it because it's better for their image. Quote, the hearings are a total circus meant to distract from Biden's failures. Quoting unnamed sources to detail the governor's thinking when he was clearly stated that this is a farce is a predictable tactic from Politico and the corporate media. This is another embarrassing effort to distract from Democrat failures. So this is just some bullshit, obviously. In recent weeks, the January 6th committee has presented evidence of Trump's involvement in a wide-ranging scheme to overturn his defeat in the 2020 general election, which is very important in my view. And frankly, if you're not paying attention to it, I would say not paying attention to the potential authoritarian takeover of this country by people who we could describe as either fascists or proto-fascists is quite literally counter-revolutionary, because if we failed this time, well then a more competent person who isn't Donald Trump might succeed next time. You might want to pay attention to the details of that and potentially be able to fight against it in some ways in the future, or at least know what to expect. Like if you can pay attention to the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, you can at very least read the bullet points from this shit. But anyway. Trump has long started rumors that he's going to launch another bid for the presidency in 2024, but according to the Politico report, GOP donors are wary of the scandal surrounding the former president and eyeing potential challengers, including DeSantis. DeSantis once cast himself as a loyal ally of the former president, but is now considered Trump's leading rival for the GOP presidential nomination in 2024. Though neither has officially declared their candidacy, both are widely believed to be preparing for White House bids. Politico reported last week that DeSantis would not be seeking Trump's endorsement for re-election in November's midterm. That's interesting. So there's a variety of reasons why he might not. One of them could be he's embroiled in this scandal and the DeSantis team worries that that affiliation could be potentially detrimental in the future. It could also be that DeSantis is trying to distance himself from Trump because he's assuming that Trump might be his competition when running for president in the future. And as such, having that endorsement might be a little weird for that as well. The article goes on to say DeSantis beat Trump in a University of New Hampshire poll of Republican voters ahead of the state's primary last week, though the former president retains a significant lead nationally, according to an aggregate of polls by 538. The thing is, it doesn't necessarily matter how these polls look when it comes to Trump v. DeSantis, because if DeSantis is in favor of the January 6th committee continuing as it is, and Donald Trump and others potentially facing legal ramifications for it, Donald Trump might be rendered incapable of running in 2024, either because the scandal is too great, or in an ideal world, he is being indicted for his crimes. But I mean, I'm not going to hold my breath knowing the fucking sorry state of this country. So it doesn't even necessarily matter that Trump beats DeSantis in a lot of polls if Trump's not in the running when it's pedal to the metal for 2024. Getting Trump out of the running, generally speaking, would be good for DeSantis and his team if he's looking to become the president in 2024. And DeSantis is also a lot smarter and a lot more competent, it would seem, than Donald Trump. He's less of a fucking buffoon, though he's still a disgusting bigot and an absolute fucking reprehensible degenerate. He is certainly smarter than Donald Trump, which is worse. So I was curious about what Ron DeSantis has said about the January 6th committee, past what we just read. So in this Newsweek article, in the aftermath of the attack, DeSantis issued a statement condemning the violence which occurred that day while praising law enforcement's attempts to protect the Capitol building from the mob. Quote, violence or rioting of any kind is unacceptable and the perpetrators must face the full weight of the law, DeSantis said in a statement. The Capitol Police do an admirable job and I thank them for their hard work. So this is just a general thing that almost any Republican would say if they're not completely on the Trump train. Even a lot of people that were on the Trump train were also, condemning the violence after it looked like the violence wasn't going to work out. Right? So while it's happening, they're not going to say these kinds of things. But after the fact, when it turns out the coup was not successful, we condemn the violence. These people, it's not good, folks. Believe me, you can't be doing that, after it didn't work. But this, it doesn't really mean much. On January 7, 2021, DeSantis repeated his condemnation of the rioters during a press conference regarding their response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Quote, it was totally unacceptable and those folks need to be held accountable and it doesn't matter what banner you're flying under, the violence is wrong. The rioting and the disorder is wrong. We're not going to tolerate it in Florida. Not to mention the Brooks Brothers riot where Al Gore won Florida, but it went to George Bush through a Supreme Court decision anyway. That was influenced by the Brooks Brothers riots. Water under the bridge by this point, surely. For a long time, DeSantis shied away from publicly discussing the January 6th attack one way or another. However, DeSantis did downplay the severity of the riot on the one-year anniversary, as well as criticizing media coverage surrounding the event. So this is very interesting. Quote, you're going to see in D.C., New York media, this is their Christmas, January 6th, okay, DeSantis said. They are going to take this and milk this for anything they could to try to be able to smear anyone who ever supported Donald Trump. Now, you could read this and think, oh, wow, he's defending Donald Trump. That is a very clear defense of Donald Trump. But then you have to recognize that DeSantis was cuddling up to Donald Trump for a while, actually. DeSantis used to be a big fan of Trump, but he's kind of backed off in the recent years, which is curious. So what I read this as is DeSantis isn't so much defending Donald Trump from the January 6th committee, but rather covering his own ass. Because if it is the case that it comes back to hurt him, that's not good for DeSantis. And he would be one of those people included in the try to be able to smear anyone who ever supported Donald Trump. Kind of curious. I don't know. This DeSantis guy doesn't seem to be a big fan of Trump anymore. DeSantis continued to attack the January 6th committee and the media focus around it on the first few televised hearings that take place. Quote, why aren't they doing hearings about more energy? Why aren't they doing hearings about inflation? Why are they constantly beating this old dead horse? So the funny thing about that is the Democrats have proposed a variety of bills that have passed in the House but died in the Senate or died in the House that have been almost unanimously voted against by Republicans to get people baby formula, to stop fuel companies from price gouging, to address inflation in a variety of ways, because they understand that if those bills did go through, those people in America getting help from those bills and the actions of them might look good for Biden. So they're willing to let you suffer in order to score political points against Joe Biden, because that's all it is for them. They don't care about inflation. They don't care about the rising gas prices. They're not in a position where they're so poor that they have to worry about the price of gas, or they're flying on fucking private jets. Come on. So what I think is actually the case is that DeSantis is actually pretty interested in the January 6th committee. I think he is very interested in Donald Trump being removed from the race in one way or another, either because he's on trial or because the political fallout is just too bad to the point where it's not really advisable for Trump to win because he would not do well. Right? Because I think he wants to run in 2024, especially after being gassed up by the most popular podcast in the country that has a lot of sway over conservatives in the country, as well as Elon Musk, who is the favored cult leader in the tech bro side of the conservative world. I don't know. We'll see. For more about Ron DeSantis, As everybody expected from the Don't Say Gay bill, so-called Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, it would turn out that teachers in Orange County, the LGBTQ ones specifically, in Florida, are being told to take down photos of their same-sex spouses in their classrooms and to not talk about them to students following the Don't Say Gay law taking effect. All rainbow articles of clothing are being banned per WFTV, which is an affiliate to ABC News. So here is that specific article, and here's a really good tweet thread that summarized a lot of it, luckily, and also goes into some other shit. So this is from Jeffrey Sachs. Sachs. Under a new civics program launched by Governor DeSantis, the Florida DOE, Department of Education, is partnering with Hillsdale College to offer professional training to public K-12 teachers. Here's what teachers were shown last week. So, people taking down pictures of straight couples too? Oh, I'm sure. That kind of consistency is certainly. I mean, why wouldn't it? 1. The founders' opposition to slavery. So it is commonly known that the founding fathers were slave owners. The foundation of this country was one of women being second-class citizens, being the property of their husbands and fathers, was the subjugation and chattel slavery of African people who were stolen from Africa, and following black people who were born in America under that slave regime. The founding fathers kind of okay with slavery because they took advantage of it. But of course, we gotta, mythologize them as being anti-slavery, but this is not as important. 2, the argument for originalism. No alternative interpretive theories were discussed. So originalism is this absolutely fucking bunk theory about the interpretation of the Constitution that I talked about in the previous video. It is essentially that the Constitution is not a living document, which is contrary to the views of the founding fathers, who literally built into it methods for it to be amended because they knew that the context of the founding of the country might be different than the context of the country, let's say, in 2022. And things might need to be amended and changed. If they thought that it was literally the document and you could not amend it, well, then they probably would not have built into it ways to amend it, right? So whenever somebody talks about originalism or textualism, like Amy Coney Barrett, they're essentially saying that they want to go back to the founding of the country when women were second-class citizens, property of their husbands and fathers, when black and brown people were subjugated, when queer people were forced to be closeted or just killed, when the poor were essentially just serfs, where child labor was still happening. At least that's what you can extend that logic to. So they write, originalism focused on the plain meaning of the Constitution, emphasizes how the terms were understood by people at the time the Constitution was ratified. Meaning is understood by those who wrote the Constitution. The founding fathers believed change in constitutional meaning should be through the process of amendment. Now, of course, it's very difficult to get a constitutional amendment in the current makeup of the Senate, especially considering the filibuster makes it so that you have to have a majority vote, a supermajority vote, in the Senate, and the Republicans are consistently obstructionist and will filibuster anything, because filibuster used to mean that you literally had to sit in the halls of Congress and talk for the entire length of your filibuster to hold up a vote, but now you don't have to do that. Now it's been changed to the point where you can just say you're filibustering and it doesn't matter. Like, it's sure, now you filibustered it. It's over. We don't even got to talk. You got to be in the fucking halls of Congress to do it. It's incredibly easy for Republicans to be obstructionists in this way. And we got all this fucking bullshit. Nobody cares about originalism. It's literally garbage. Why the fuck could you make amendments if the Constitution isn't a living, breathing document that is subject to change? 3, the political, moral, and social need for religion. So they're trying to indoctrinate your kids. This is for K-12. They are trying to indoctrinate your kids. They're trying to make your kids religious outside of what your particular religious denomination is. If you're secular, if you're atheist or agnostic, if you happen to be a Muslim, if you happen to be Jewish, if you happen to be a Buddhist, whatever it is, they're going to put more emphasis on Christianity because they want your kids to be Christians, right? This is why they say all the time that America was founded on Judeo-Christian values and that this is a Christian country, which it isn't and it wasn't. So that's cool. 4, the founders' support for religious institutions, which seems to be contradicted in the separation of church and state, which the activist conservative Supreme Court that we have right now has slowly been whittling away at, so that's neat. And for some other stuff that we've been talking about, meanwhile, Orange County's legal team has introduced guidelines for how public schools should implement HB 1557, aka the Don't Say Gay bill. Among the new rules for teachers in that county, 1, no more rainbow clothing or photographs of same-sex partners. Of course, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, and let's say you're a man and you have a picture of a woman on your desk and that's your wife, well, that's normal, so that's okay. But if you're in a same-sex relationship, well, now that's abnormal. We can't be having that, because then kids are gonna have to learn that gay people exist. 2, no more safe space stickers. Also, teachers must out gay students to their parents, because parental rights are absolute, of course. But teachers must use a student's birth pronouns regardless of parental desires, because parental rights are unimportant, of course. Just, you know, bold-faced fucking hypocrisy. Shocker, it's a Republican. Shocker, it's conservatism. Literally everything they do is contradictory to the things that they claim to believe in, because they don't care about anything. They don't have any actual beliefs. They just want power, and that's it. They want to enact their authoritarian agenda on the rest of us, and that's it. They don't care about logic. They don't care about facts. They don't care about data. They don't care about debate. Just care about power. A spokesman for Orange County acknowledges that some of these interpretations of HB 1557 are extreme, but explains that staff need to, quote, err on the side of caution because the law is so vague and the penalties so severe, which was a major criticism that a variety of lawyers made about the bill. And centrists were saying, oh, you're overreacting over. Oh, it doesn't say you can't say gay. Oh, it doesn't say that you can't have a picture of your wife or husband if you're in a homosexual relationship on your desk. They're not going to start banning that, right? They don't really have to. That's what's called the chilling effect, you fucking moron. People will get so worried about potentially losing their jobs as teachers and being fined and subject to litigation after being sued that they need to err on the side of caution because they don't know what might get them in trouble. It's almost like it was a method to outlaw these things without explicitly outlawing them, because they understand that, at least at the time, it would be unconstitutional to do so. With the makeup of the current Supreme Court and, perhaps Obergefell, Griswold, and all that are subject to revision, subject to review. Perhaps we'll undo gay marriage and all this as well. Why not? It's all about our right to privacy, after all, even though it should be about the right to bodily autonomy. So this is the person that is apparently, in addition to allowing for the deaths of 75,000 people, plus in his state, it's so-called apparently did a good job on COVID deaths. Apparently this is the person that Joe Rogan and Elon Musk think should be the next president, because he's essentially Donald Trump without the baggage. So we've talked about in the past, as it pertains to the libs of TikTok shit, we talked about how the Don't Say Gay bill was actually influenced by libs of TikTok, because the press secretary for Ron DeSantis, Christina Pushaw, credited and openly corresponded with the libs of TikTok account, and she credited the account with so-called opening her eyes about a lot of the gender-related stuff that teachers were doing in the classroom or whatever, which was literally just explaining that my pronouns are they, them, and what that means. Or, oh, that's my husband on the desk and I am a man, and we are in a relationship. Some people have two moms, some people have two dads, some people have a mom and a dad, that kind of shit. Apparently that's too much. Apparently it's too much. You can't have that. So this fucking deranged lunatic decided to credit libs of TikTok. So she's been on the radar for a little bit, and she posts a lot for some reason. The big poster. So this is about what we just talked about. This person says, the Teachers Association playing games trying to imply the law requires teachers to do these things. They know it will get the media's attention, but it's all shenanigans on the part of the Teachers Association, which is opposed to the legislation. She says, this is my impression of the latest HB 1557 controversy too. So that's fucking idiotic, because like I said, it's a chilling effect. You don't have to directly outlaw rainbows or the word gay or people who are in same-sex relationships having their husband or wife in a picture on their desk. You don't have to outwardly do that, because the law is literally so vague, as many lawyers said, that they don't know. It might get them in trouble. They might be subject to litigation. They might lose their jobs, so they're going to err on the side of caution. It's called the chilling effect. So she says, this is my impression of the latest HB 1557 controversy 2. FYI, the law says nothing about family photos. Media. Ask yourselves why teachers are only being asked to remove family photos in Orange County and not in the 90% of our state that is considerably more conservative, when you're literally just giving the game away. If you're going to point out that not in the 90% of our state that is considerably more conservative, well, it's almost like Orange County, which is the part of the state which by your own admission is not considerably more conservative. Well, that's going to tend to be where more LGBTQ people are, because it's less hostile for them to be there. You're literally giving the game away. You're talking about how it's directly targeting queer people, queer teachers. Public relations is literally this woman's job. What the fuck? Okay, anyway, I might have wanted to word that one differently. Also, I could not help but notice when I was preparing for this segment that, Jesus Christ, this person is very scary looking. Listen, I'm not one to look shame, okay? You can look how you want, all right? But goddamn, if you mix this with her politics and with her forceful drive to indoctrinate your kids and the anti-queer legislation that she's pushing, holy fuck. What is going on here? Anyway. Also, just because she's a fucking insane lunatic. Biden went to Madrid to talk at the NATO summit and apparently said, quote, "The one thing that has been destabilizing the world is the outrageous behavior of the Supreme Court of the United States in overruling not only Roe v. Wade, but essentially challenging the right to privacy." True. There are a variety of countries that look to the United States for cues when it comes to a variety of cultural or social changes. That's what being one of the most powerful countries in the world gives you. A lot of influence. When the United States legalized gay marriage through Obergefell in 2015, that had ripple effects around the world in places where it hadn't happened before. Generally speaking, the acceptance of gay people goes up if the most powerful country in the world has a positive view of gay people. Much the same way that if the most powerful country in the world now has a negative view of gay people, that too can have ripple effects around the world. It's the same for the right to an abortion. It is the same for the right to privacy, to bodily autonomy. So Christina Pushaw, in all her wisdom, has said, quote, "If any other president publicly attacked the Supreme Court of his own country, where did he attack them?" He's literally pointing out that what they are doing is contrary to decades-long precedent, but okay. "On foreign soil, sure. In the presence of world leaders, okay. He would be called an insane dictator." What? But with Biden, it's just another Tuesday. Where are the, quote, "norms and institutions people on this?" He would be called an insane dictator for literally one of the most milquetoast statements possible. He had to be pushed by the broader public to get to the point where he would say that maybe just slightly, Jack, look alive. Maybe we should carve out an exemption to the filibuster if the Republicans are okay with it, maybe, in order to codify Roe v. Wade into law. And now he's talking about how the Supreme Court overruling Roe v. Wade, multiple decade-long precedent, and challenging the right to privacy might have ripple effects across the country. That makes him an insane dictator. Which is to say, if Democrats are worried that unpacking the court by nominating 4 more to get to 13 Supreme Court justices, 1 justice for every circuit court, which is constitutional, or all manner of things, opening up abortion clinics on federal lands, if they're worried that doing those things is going to make the right wing call them dictators, even this milquetoast bullshit is enough. You're going to be called a fucking dictator no matter what you do, because Republicans, their entire game plan is projection. Republicans are, in one breath, removing the bodily autonomy of women and people who can give birth unilaterally through Supreme Court decision, leaving it up to so-called states' rights in states that don't really have functioning democracies anymore because of gerrymandering, because of voter suppression. States' rights don't mean goddamn jack unless you have a democracy, which we don't in a lot of these states. But apparently that's not dictatorial. Also, just because it's fun to pick at this person's absolute fucking beautiful mind, there was a tragedy that happened, and 42 people were found dead inside a tractor trailer on the southwest side. 16 others were taken to area hospitals in varying conditions, according to multiple SAPD sources. And this is an absolute tragedy because we assume that these people are trying to get to the United States to avoid whatever country of origin that they have, the negative ramifications of living there, as it pertains to the bad leadership there, as it pertains to the influence of more powerful countries when it comes to regime change in a variety of Latin American countries. They would pack themselves like sardines into a incredibly hot tractor trailer, and now the 42 of them have died as a result of that. And apparently this fucking idiot, this absolute fucking brilliant mind, says at least 42 people died in a tractor trailer because of the reckless open border agenda of this lawless administration. Horrific. If we had open borders, why the fuck were they packing themselves like sardines into a hot tractor trailer to smuggle themselves across the border, you absolute fucking idiot? If we had open borders, do you not think that they would just cross the border, walk across it, come through car legally? Because if it's an open border, they could do that. What the fuck are you talking about? But you would argue that this is one of the smartest Republicans there are. Immigrants died due to harsh border laws and Republicans just blame the open borders? Yup. The party told you not to believe the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. Demand, request, George Orwell. That's literally Republicans. To go along with the absolute lunacy of conservatives nowadays, we are getting triggered over pads and tampons again. So this happened with turning red back, way back when that first came out. And now it's apparently happening to Baymax or whatever. I didn't even know this happened until this shit popped up on my feed. Christopher Rufo, who is one of the major architects of the CRT, critical race theory, moral panic, and also the anti-trans so-called grooming shit, who has openly proclaimed how proud he is to literally just be a propagandist pushing an agenda, has said, "Exclusive! I've obtained leaked video from Disney's upcoming show Baymax, which promotes transgender flag and the idea that men can have have periods to children as young as 2 years old. It's all part of Disney's plan to re-engineer the discourse around kids and sexuality. You assume also choking back tears. So let's see what's so egregious in this video. Are you ready? It might be shocking, you know. Those with delicate sensibilities, you know, you have been warned.
Excuse me, which of these products would you recommend?
So we assume Baymax, which is this robot, I assume, is here either to get hygiene products, menstrual products for himself or themself, or whatever human he serves. I don't fucking know.
Oh, well, these are the tampons I usually use.
Thank you.
I always get the ones with wings.
Thank you.
Get unscented and bleach-free if you can.
Thank you.
Yo, my daughter loves these.
Thank you.
These might be easier if it's her first period.
These are really environmentally friendly.
What's the issue? I can't believe they're tearing apart the fabric of America. Yeah, the cotton fabric, the cotton tampon, the pad of America is being torn apart by these disgusting liberals. So, if you didn't notice it, not only do we know that conservatives are excited to engage in a moral panic around a cis girl and her cis mother talking about pads, tampons, and periods in a children's movie in, what was it, Turning Red or whatever, that film? We already know that they don't like the concept of movies talking about the fact that AFAB people have periods at all. But now we've targeted, you know, the one thing that you probably missed when watching this.
Oh, well, these are the tampons I usually use.
Thank you.
I prefer pads. They're
Okay.
more comfortable for me.
Thank you.
I always get the ones with wings.
Thank you.
Get
Okay.
unscented and bleach-free if you can.
Thank you.
Yo, my daughter loves these.
Oh, there it is. It's because there's a black man talking about how when he's out shopping to pick up menstrual products for his daughter, you know, that's just too much. No, actually, it's because there's a person with a trans flag shirt here who is apparently a trans mask person. So for those of you who don't know, that is typically a person who is assigned female at birth, who has transitioned to and identifies as a man, right? So those people can still have periods, even though they identify as men, even though if they take testosterone, they can still have their period. So, you know, a variety of changes can happen and blah, blah, blah. What's funny is that a lot of the dumbasses in the comments of this thread, they said something along the lines of, when I pretend to have a period like these, because for some reason some of these dumbass conservatives, they don't understand anything about basic biology or sociology, they think that this person's a trans woman, and because of that they identify them as an AMAB person and therefore they can't have a period. But anyway, Chris Rufo, because he's a little bit smarter than the average fucking idiot, which is not saying much, identifies that this is supposed to be a portrayal of a trans man, and as such, you know, you could tell by the deeper voice and the dress that they've decided to put him in that, oh my god, men could have periods. So I wrote, surely one of these days conservatives will learn basic biology and find out that people get their periods before they're adults. In fact, it's almost like that's one of the pivotal parts of becoming an adult. On the steps to getting to that point in a person's life, if they are AFAB, they have their period before they're adults. And as such, having positive portrayals of people engaging with the concept of periods existing, like in Turning Red, like in Baymax, that's a really good thing for even a lot of the cis girls out there who will either have periods in the future, are currently going through it, or have been going through it. It's almost like destigmatizing the idea that these people have periods is beneficial to the comfort of all of the people that have periods, and allows for more people to have less of a negative view of it, and it's generally a good thing. But obviously they're mad about it because for some reason when conservatives think of people having a period, they immediately think of having sex with that person or that person having sex. For a lot of these conservatives, when a person has their period for the first time, for some of these people, that's when they become, you know, an adult, when they come of age, and it's fucked up and it's weird. But for some reason, conservatives are very excited to sexualize kids. What's weird is that when they see two gay men, let's say, walking down the street, two gay adults walking down the street, for some reason, I don't know what's deranged machinations in their mind, they immediately think of those people fucking. And it's really weird. For some reason, immediately, that's their first instinct, which is explained by the idea that they think that being queer, being gay, being trans is inherently sexual. Because conservatives conflate romance and sexuality. They think those two things are the same thing. Because the ultimate end goal of relationships for conservatives is sex, is procreation. They are perverts in literally the worst way. So when they conceptualize the idea that people can be trans or gay in their youth, they immediately think of it not in a romantic aspect of like, oh, you know, kids have crushes. Sometimes kids will have crushes on, you know, girls or boys, whatever. For some reason, they immediately think of it as a sexual thing. And that's why this hysteria comes in. Because of their own, for one, ignorance, for two, degeneracy. It's fucking weird, man. Anyway, I'm on a tangent. What else we have here? Oh, and also, you know, just because we're here, we have this, I believe this is one of the prominent gender criticals or TERFs out there. So reactionary conservatives who use the aesthetics of feminism to continue their bigotry against trans people specifically. And usually that also extends out to all queer people. Quote, these flags and signs on shop doors are not simple signs of welcome. What they say is if you are a sex realist, you are not welcome here. What does that even mean? Sex realist? Is that like a race realist? Well, it might actually be, now that I think about it. You are his second-class citizen. You should feel uncomfortable and on edge. Surely the flags that are literally meant to be as inclusive as possible to all people, surely these flags shouldn't make anybody uncomfortable and feel as if they are like violence to you. What are you talking about? It's very strange. Like, I don't know how you see this as an attack. I think Charlie Kirk said some shit like, oh, this is what people who have conquered cities and nations do. You know, they put flags up like this, which is ridiculous because it's usually the state or the municipality putting up these flags as a sign of support for Pride Month for queer people, which is just a method of trying to achieve equality. But I don't know, man. That's crazy. Imagine being triggered over a rainbow. I don't get it. Like, even if I was a cishet person, I'm not. But if I was, or I should say when I thought I was, like, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago? When I thought I was cisgender, heterosexual, I saw all this fucking queer shit. I saw all these pride flags and I was like, wow, cool. That doesn't really bother me. Now, it may not directly reference me as a cisgender heterosexual person that I thought I was in the past, but it didn't feel like an attack to me. It just felt like, oh, there are these other people out there that are currently marginalized, and these flags are a show of support for them. Even if I'm not included in it, I don't have to be included in everything. Now, because I understand myself to be not cis and not heterosexual, now I am included in it. So there you go. You know, like I always say, if I go back in time, there are a variety of ways I could have known if I had the necessary education that I was not cis, that I was not heterosexual. A fair, like, while back, too. I can notice a lot of things. But, you know, it is what it is. I was the victim of conservatives wanting to indoctrinate kids, not teaching about the difference between gender and sex, not teaching about the fact that, you know, gay people exist and that's okay. I did not learn all this shit, and I lived in an area hostile to it, so I did not find out about it until later on. This is a very common thing that happens. Anyway, Ron DeSantis seems overwhelmingly likely to run for president in 2024. I feel like he is very excited about the January 6th committee potentially leading to Trump either tanking the polls when it comes to the 2024 Republican primary, or maybe even not even being able to run at all if he's indicted, which would make his job of becoming the president easier. And I think he's colluding, allegedly, maybe, with the Jan 6 committee and the deep state to get in the way of Trump. I think he's anti-Trump. It's pretty fucked up. Now, surely, you know, people on a variety of message boards are already talking about this. But, you know, perhaps the word should spread. Anyway. I feel like this segment went on a winding road. And it was fairly rambly. I don't know. Hey, what can you do? Whatever. I hope you enjoyed it, at least. This video is CALLOUT as Pro Fluffy. Thanks so much for the support. This is actually your second win. The first one was all the way back in November 2021. Appreciate you sticking around. If you'd like to be the next kind of CALLOUT, remember to fucking follow my Twitter. Dumbass. All you can do is retweet video links whenever they go live. It's very simple. You have to follow me as well on Twitter. Remember to hit the sub button. All notifications on, hit the bell. I'd appreciate that as well. Leave a like if you like. Comment something super cool about how Ron DeSantis is being set up by the deep state in order to influence Donald Trump to either not run or lose. And also maybe spread that in a variety of places where you can get away with it and maybe sow some discord. Who knows? Could be funny. Could be good memes. Could be some epic trolls. And have a good day.